Hey, welcome to the Cam and Otis Show. Another special edition because we got another good buddy of mine joining us, a fellow veteran and Marine. So we gotta keep things simple today. Uh, and that's always easy for me to do is to keep it simple. Raleigh, man, good to see you.
Good to see you too, Otis. Thanks for having me on your show. Good to see Cam here as well.
Yeah, yeah. So for those of you who don't know, Raleigh Wilkins, sales platoon, which is really one of the coolest things out there. Yep, and for those in radio land, Raleigh just held up his coffee cup, which says sales platoon. So I always like to play DJ in that sense, for the radio land folks. But I want to jump into the sales platoon, the catalyst that you as a young Marine getting out, going into the corporate world, and you said, there's a problem here. Where'd that come from, man?
Experience.
Yeah. Okay.
Experience.
Hey, that'll do it for the day's show. All right.
Yep. Camden, run us out.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it came as a rude awakening in that, this was a long time ago in a galaxy far away, but we didn't have the many of the different things we have now. We didn't have Skill Bridge. We didn't have a really formal transition program for people coming out of the military. And so the general guiding principle was you did your time, you got out, you put the uniform in the closet. Now it's time to go get busy. And anybody who's old enough to remember, there was one of Tom Cruise's movies when he looked exactly the same as he does now somehow, but he was a young Army guy getting out. And the movie was called Cocktail. And, his story was essentially my story at that time where, he came out, he wanted to go into the corporate world, and everywhere he went, they're like, you need an education. You need a college degree. You don't have a college degree. Go back and get schooling. And so he ends up a bartender in a bar, going to night school, trying to figure out how to enter into the business world. And man, that's what it was like. It was culture shock.
So could you flip and juggle the bottles and stuff? I mean, I can picture you very easily, Raleigh, being a bartender, by the way.
Yeah, I was a bartender while still on active duty to supplement my income. I did that, and then I sold vacuums door to door. So I made a ton more money selling vacuums actually than I did juggling bottles. But it was prettier girls when I was juggling bottles, so I like that a little better.
Yeah.
But it was anyway. Yeah. So it was the challenge is that we come. For me, I didn't come from a traditional background either. I was a kid that came up in a small town. I ended up finding myself into living with other families, eventually going in court system and being given away to a family, foster care situation for the last couple of years. And so by the time I got to the Marine Corps, it was pretty much the Marine Corps, a monastery.
Mhm.
That's what my grandma would say. And she said, the priests don't want you. So the Marine Corps took care of me and transformed my life and gave me a sense of purpose and dignity and a set of moral principles and a structure. And I've always done well in structured environments. And so you tell me a pathway, I'll get there. And so, we may or may not talk about my military career, but, had a lot of success. But when I got out, it was challenging to realize my credits didn't transfer.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
Nobody knew what that colored bits of cloth meant. Nobody knew what the rank or the stripes on the shoulder meant or didn't mean. Nobody cared about your latest fitness report or didn't really even understand any of the schools I'd gone through. It was just like, they understood Marine, thank God, from Clint Eastwood and good movies, but, that was, beyond that, they didn't have a clue on what I did and couldn't see why I was applying to these jobs in the corporate world. Why don't you go be a police officer? It's like, because I got shot at by experts. Why would I trade that for getting shot at by, amateurs for $18 an hour?
How did you create or find that new sense of purpose when you transitioned out? Because I think that's a gap that a lot of people fall into.
Yeah, desperation. Desperation's a good motivator. And, I didn't have one. Originally, my sense of purpose was I was going to go to law school and be a maritime lawyer. I thought that's what I wanted to do. Study the law to seas. It seemed pretty cool. Some days I still think maybe that'd have been a better push. But so I did enroll in college, but it was the sense of purpose came out of the desperation of, I know I want to be master of my own fate, captain of my own soul, but how am I going to do that? I had these big dreams about success and all the rest. And I needed a job because I needed to pay rent. I didn't have, retirement pay coming in. I didn't have any supplements to my income, didn't have a family to fall back on. And so worked a bunch of odd jobs that I didn't want to do long term, like being a personal trainer and things like that. And eventually another buddy of mine, a Marine, had gotten a job in facilities maintenance. That's basically setting up chairs, for those who don't know, for a large organization. And he got me an interview. And so he got me an interview at Phillips, and I ended up interviewing, did well in interviewing. I think the Marine Corps boards that I was on helped me prepare for that. If you've been screamed at by experts and doing military boards, a lot about bearing. And so I think that helped. And ended up finding myself as an executive assistant to the SVP of operations, which was usually reserved as a pinnacle point in a career for administrators. And it wasn't something quite often given to young 26-year-old, men, especially at that time. So I found myself in this pool of, very seasoned female professionals who had dedicated their life, and there was a little resentment, I think, like, how'd this kid even get into this job?
Oh, I bet they were looking at you in that way, right?
Yeah. And then I look more baby face than I do now. So it's like, they're like, how's this kid gonna, but that was my entry point into corporate America. And it was lucky in a way. I had no idea, because if I had taken a job in a cubicle, I might still be in a cubicle. But because I was outside that man's office and he had worked his way to a really nice position, I got to listen into these board meetings, and I get to hear people making decisions about businesses well beyond what my pay grade was. It was like being a private first class sitting in with generals. And I started to understand that I had a mind for business because my mind would come to the same conclusions theirs did. And I started to think, well, if my mind's thinking the way theirs is already, maybe there's a home for me here in this business world.
I got to say, I love that, because I think back to some of my business schooling and management classes. I had a similar type of epiphany where I knew I wanted to go into business. And then there were days in classes where I was like, wow, I'm putting in next to zero effort and getting this same outcome that a lot of people are getting with all of that effort. It's like, I might actually have a knack for this. So how did you take that, that natural ability that you realized and create a plan out of it?
Yeah, I wish I could say it was that smart. It's not how it works. In hindsight, I can sketch it out and tell you that it worked out well. There's the great hand of fate and destiny that I think guides us all if we're quiet enough to hear it. And I had this inkling. I'd been a combat journalist, and so I had this thought. There were these guys in the company, they drove nice cars, they had their own parking spots. And when they went into the role, they called it a VP, a vice president role. They got a champagne and strawberry breakfast that everybody was invited to celebrate them. And I thought, I like strawberries, so maybe I want to be a VP. And so I went to go, and I thought, what if I just asked my boss permission to go and interview these guys and just say, how'd you become a vice president? What does that even mean? Because I didn't know. It's not like there's a ranked structure in the civilian world. I mean, there kind of is, like worker, manager, director, VP, SVP, EVP, but it ain't the same. What is a sergeant major in one company is a private first class in another, and they got different titles, and there's no boards, and you can basically call yourself anything you want. It's crazy. It's a wild west out there if you're a military person listening in. So titles mean very little in the civilian world. In some places, they mean everything. But at any rate, I went out to the VPs of sales, and every one of them that I asked gave me at least 15 minutes. And some gave me 15 minutes and dismissed me as a crazy young kid. And then some gave me hours. And I started to learn about operations and marketing and finance and sales. And I really liked the sales guy. Now, I told you that earlier that I'd spent some time selling vacuums door to door. And that was pretty much what I knew about sales. Don't trust car salesmen. When you go into somewhere to buy a pair of shoes, the guy's going to annoy you and bring out 3 or 4 pairs and pester you till you get 2 pairs, or you're going to have to be called during dinner to do some timeshare. So salespeople were to be avoided. It was certainly not a career that called to me or I thought was going to be anything intriguing. But he spoke about it in a different way. And, he didn't say this, but I'm going to summarize basically 20 years of experience. and say that sales in the business world, if you're coming out of the military, is probably what you're thinking a consultant is. Because consultants don't really do much. I mean, I'm not trying to avoid to, offend anybody that's a consultant, but you're basically paid to go in there and help them solve a problem that they've already diagnosed. Okay, that's great. Salespeople show up unannounced to the door to help you diagnose problems you don't even know you have, and then introduce solutions and services you've never heard of so that your business functions better than it did before you ever got there. So you've got two steps on either side that consultants don't do. You're helping companies lead them to a place they didn't even know that was a problem point for them. And then you're going to introduce services and solutions they'd never heard about. So you're going to run into a lot of rejection because you're trying to help people that don't want to be helped. And that's called bothering them. When you try to help people that don't want to be helped, it's called bothering them. But what he and I eventually came up with, and what I came up with, is that's what sales is. And so I wanted to try it, but there were really no roles for me in that company. So I went into marketing, spent about 1.5 years in marketing, figured out that wasn't really for me. It's too far removed. Anybody who's been in marketing, it's not really as customer facing as you think it is. You're running regression analysis on controls to see who got the highest click rates. It's not real sexy. So it's a lot of statistics, a lot of modeling, which is great, fed my, database brain. But I decided to leave that job, take half the pay to go into a sales role at T-Mobile, and they had a fledgling B2B sales division at the time. And so I went in there as a young salesman. And so that's how I ended up in sales.
So was that, I heard a bit of the want to, what I'd love to dive into is what was it about, or what is it, because you're still doing it, what is it about sales that draws you to it?
Well, originally it was the money, to be honest. It was, I saw when I interviewed, they said they're going to pay me $28,000 in base salary, but they showed me a promotion path to get to 45K. And then they said I could double that in commissions. Well, I was making like 45K at my other job. So I was like, I can make 90K here or 45K there. And they're telling me the only difference is I just have to apply myself. I'll do that, because the role I was in, it was going to be like 8 to 10% increases each year for the next 3 to 4 years. And maybe I go into a manager role. And then I was like, then maybe 5 years later, you're in a director role. And you're two types of people in the world. There's sleep well, eat well. I had never been a sleep well person. I ain't been a day of my life since I was 15 that I didn't always hustle for something. So it was, I wasn't eat well. I'd take the risk. So that's what attracted me to it. I'll tell you, 6 months into that job, I felt like I was the dumbest human being that ever walked the planet, because here I am trying to survive on $28,000 a year. I was not hitting my quota. I was within, now here's why I don't trust resumes. I was in the top 5 reps in my division, but my division was the lowest ranking division in the lowest ranking region in T-Mobile history. We only had 10 reps on the team, and I was number 5, and I was number 495 out of 500 in reps in the company. So you can write a resume to say whatever the hell you want. I was still in the top 5 reps in my division, which was true. That you get some more color on it, you start to understand. You understand what I'm saying? So, but what happened was I went home, and here's the we all have our moment. We had our moment in boot camp. You had your moment. Yeah. If you were in any kind of an NDOC, you had your moment when you're in any kind of an engagement in the military. You have these moments in life, and it's a moment where everything in you gives out. And you got nowhere to go. You really have nowhere to go. It's like completely abandon yourself to failure or push through. And, and some people get carried away with the tide of life. I think most of us as human beings have this inner reflex that as military members, most of us, if not all of us, have hit. And we know that point where the body quits, but they keep moving. And you're like, there's a force unseen. And mine came in the form of, sometimes they said that power comes in the form of human flesh. And mine came in the power of my roommate, who invoked 2 things that got me to turn it around. One, he said, dude, you can't quit your job. You got to pay rent, which was a brutal reminder that the world requires you to pay rent.
Right.
The second thing he said was, I thought Marines don't quit. Oh, now you've invoked Chesty Puller. You know what I mean? Yep. The entire fate of the Marine Corps' reputation now resides on my shoulder. Now, of course, it doesn't. You know what I mean? But
it felt that way, though. I'm sure.
But it felt that way.
I can't let down the Corps.
I can't let down the Corps. That's how I got this job, was talking about the Corps and my discipline. And he said, plus, if you're being honest with yourself and you've been honest with me, it doesn't sound like you're really working at work. Sounds like you guys spend a lot of time complaining instead of doing. And maybe if you just did your job instead of complaining about your job, at least you feel going out. And I'm like, this guy's harsh truth, man, you know?
Whoa.
So
Can you write a book? Can we buy his book somewhere? Like, come on.
Yeah, because that's,
write a book. Yeah, but he's a very successful lawyer now. He's a SCAD and arms, and he went back into the military. So I mean, the military back into the government. But at any rate, you know, really good guy, really helped me out. And so one of the, you know, so I decided I was going to zig instead of zag. And that meant giving up on the camaraderie of the negativity of that group, which is challenging. Because I was going to lose my friend group, because it meant I was going to start being honest. I was going to be honest with myself and my superiors about my numbers, what I was doing, where I was weak, what I needed help. And I figured, you know what, if I'm going to fail anyway, let me fail honestly. And in doing that and approaching it in a different way, I started to get help, because the manager wasn't having a lot of people going to him asking for help. He recommended some books I read. I read those books: Cold Calling Basics by Stephen Schiffman, Miller Hyman's Concepts for Selling, Strategic Selling, Spin Selling by Rackham. And I started to realize, because I had failed enough, that there was a system that I was failing to adopt. And I started to adopt these systems into my day-to-day. And the fundamental one was that nobody buys what your product does. They don't care about T-Mobile. They don't care about cell phones. They care about what it's going to do for their business. So I fundamentally sat down to understand my customer and what it is that they actually did. And I started to understand that there was a group of individuals in our organizations that we were calling on that did care about staying connected. And those were other salespeople. And when those salespeople, when I went to the companies, I started to interview them, and I said, what is it that is, and I don't do this anymore because it's the phrase is overused, but I said, what keeps you up at night when you think about your sales team? And they said, attrition. We get guys that go and they're out all day long and they're in the field, and then they have to go back to the hotel room and they have to plug in these things called air cards. Now, for the young people, didn't used to have the internet. So you had to have an internet in a card that you would shove into your computer, and then you would dial up so that you could download your emails at the end of the day, because you didn't have them. So then they would get their emails, work 2 or 3 hours at night. And so they're working 10, 12-hour days. And they're like, this is ridiculous. Well, we just had a device that was launching, T-Mobile had, called the BlackBerry, which was kind of like a forerunner of the iPhone. Nobody was selling them because you had to pay for them. There was no free device. It was like $250 to $350. That's probably like $500 to $800 in today's dollars.
Yeah.
And so it was like, how do you get somebody to buy a line of service for something that's going to cost them twice as much as they currently spend? And so I reframed the problem, and I started calling up companies, and I said, hey, I work with companies that have problems with Salesforce attrition and help them improve their communication with their teams. Do you have 15 minutes for me to explain why I'm calling? You know, can we set up a time? And I started explaining to them how to do that. And then I said, look, I happen to be a wireless provider. One of the things that I've learned to do is to look at people's bills and make sure they're not being overcharged. I didn't say I'm going to save you money. I sat across from a guy, Matt from T-Mobile. What if I can save you some money? No. Okay. Hey, it's Matt from T-Mobile. What if I can save you some money? I was like, I've never. But overcharged is an emotional word.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That flips the whole thing. It's like somebody's stealing from me. Not saving money. Somebody's stealing from me.
Yeah. So I said, send me your wireless bills. I do an audit for you. And so I could look at them and I could be like, wow, they're paying for 10 lines. Dude, I'm not going to take you through the whole pitch. But the thing was, I essentially was able to show them an ROI that if they purchased our devices, the savings alone would pay for the devices and the plan within the first 3 months. So they were actually turning a cost center into a place where they're able to put money back into their business and improve the productivity of their teams. Now, here's the behind the scenes. When I sold a line of service, I made $50. And my quota was to sell 60 lines of service. So $3,000 a month, 12 months a year, $36,000. That's where they got the 40, 28 plus 36, or you make your 45 and you can double your salary, whatever. But if you sold a BlackBerry as a voice and a data line, so it was not $50, but 50 plus $30 and $80. But because they counted separately, you could get an accelerator up to 200%. So I could sell 60 lines of service and I would make $3,000. I could sell 60 BlackBerries and that would be $4,800 times 2, or $9,600. So for the same amount of work, I could go from selling $3,000 to $9,600. What do you think I sold? BlackBerries.
Yeah.
And in doing that, I started to set my goals on doubling and tripling my own quota. So I never set my quota, what my quota was. I set it at 2 to 3 times that and worked backwards. If I have to do this many calls to hit quota, how do I hit triple the amount? How do I get referrals? What do I do? In the space of a year, I got meritoriously promoted twice by exceeding my quota by 150% 3 months in a row. And I went from being literally in the bottom 5 reps in the company to being in the top 5 reps in the winner circle at T-Mobile, making paychecks that were $12,000, $15,000 a month in commissions. And people were asking me what I was doing. And I just said, my job. And, but the first moment, I'll tell you this, and then, we'll open it up more, but there was a moment when I was in foster care. I was living with a family. I moved out. I actually had my own apartment. I was 17. I was washing dishes at this little restaurant called Aldo's in Virginia Beach. They had hired me in way beyond my pay rate at like $8 an hour because they knew I was 17. I was underage and they were just trying to help me out. But they'd given us a bonus because we'd done a good job washing dishes. I had $20. $20 is like a windfall, okay, when you're that age and you're that poor. And so I splurged and I went to Raleigh's, not because it's a similar name, but because they had good burgers. And I got double cheeseburger, large fry, and a Coke. And I had my Coke in one hand and my cheeseburger bag in the other. I'm riding my bicycle back to this little crappy garden apartment thing I'm renting. And there's a lot of grease in that bag. And you see where this is going. And as I'm riding, the bag kind of shakes and then it bursts and the burger hits the wheels. The fries just scatter. Oh. And I'm just like on the side of the road. And I'm like, I want to crawl into a hole. Like, there's cars zooming by. I got greasy food. I'm like, I get no breaks in this life. Mm-hmm. And then I had this moment the first time I started that I had a company, they told me yes. And I remember the company, it was Human Rights Campaign. And it started as a hard no. Then it started as a maybe. Then I went through the sales process. Then they decided to move with me. They decided they were going to go forward. It hit my 3rd month in a row. They gave me my first promotion. And I knew I was going to get a commission check of several $1,000s out of that. And it had started as a no. And I knew that I had developed a process that for the rest of my life, no matter what happened, I would never have to have that broken bag of cheeseburgers again. I would never be sitting there waiting for somebody to give me $20. And so in that moment, just like the Marine Corps transformed me from that young kid without purpose to a man with a mission, I was transformed by sales from being a person that was going to stand in the line and trade dollars to hours to a person that was always going to be able to provide. Maybe not in the way I want at the time I want, but I'd gotten a skill set. And then I wanted to go into management because how do you not want to give that away if you have it?
Yeah. What I want to know, because a lot of us, most people, most Americans, we'll put it that way. They start off with money as their incentive, right? And they pull, what's the salary, all this sort of stuff, how much can I make? You get the dollar signs. And I mean, even as a lieutenant, I remember, those first few paychecks and, oh my gosh, I get COLA too. And whoa, man, big money, cha-ching, cha-ching, you're feeling it, right? Those first few paychecks and you're doing it for that. But there's a point in life where the money becomes, I wouldn't say irrelevant, because we all know that, you gotta pay the bills, right? You gotta keep the roof over your head, food on the table, sort of thing. But the attitude towards it changes. And when did that happen for you? You kind of touched on it in the management piece, saying move to management and sharing, but what was that shift like for you?
Yeah, I think it was in that management. And it's really 2 questions in there. When did money stop being so important? And when did the legacy become more important? When I was going to pass it along? And so I don't know that the money stopped being important right then. I mean, managers make a lot more base salary and your risk is supposedly diversified across a large group. It's not what usually happens. Most sales managers end up carrying about 1.5 times the quota of a rep, plus trying to manage people just because of the nature of turnover on sales teams. But, it was, to me, I think that moment didn't happen until I got probably to mid-career in sales. Because I had gotten to a point where I was looking at these guys as, they need to sell so that we can hit our number. So I hit my number. That's kind of just the way I looked at it.
And that's the way the system's set up too, right? I mean, that's the incentive.
Yeah, the money and the incentive. But I think it's when, it was a very similar moment. I'd taken on a new role as a director of sales. I'd come out of a really tough, difficult time. I'd worked my way up really quickly to very senior sales positions. Recession of 2009 hit, ended up in a different type of position. Ended up going back and being a frontline sales manager for about 3 years at a company called Elsevier. And I learned a lot about that I'd missed out on that frontline sales manager. I'd gone into senior leadership really quick. And so I really spent 3 years learning what it was like to help train and develop. And I found that that's what I love doing. I love teaching. I love giving back. I love when the light came on. I love when they took a piece of that. But when I got to this next job, and I was really, really well compensated for it, I was told that I had 3 people that needed to be fired from that team. Mm. And I'm not going to go a lot of it. So, I'm just going to take you through it. But they'd said these 3 individuals. And so I had learned enough by that point that that's somebody else's opinion. It's just like going in a new command. I don't know you. You don't know me. Who knows what you're. So I pulled them aside and I said, I'm going to approach this differently. And I said, look, here's the scuttlebutt on you. You're not performing and you need to be performance managed out. I said, this is the file they gave me. I don't care about that file. To me, you got a clean slate. We're starting over. What I do know is you got 2 choices. Both of those are going to require effort. The first one is if you want to, or if you don't want to, if you don't want to be performance managed, if you don't want to be helped, I don't want to bother you. So I just want you to go, this is on a Thursday. I said, I want you to go home over the weekend, obviously work tomorrow, go home over the weekend, come back on Monday. Let me know what you want to do. If you decide you don't want it, you've had enough of this company, let me know. Just do me the dignity to tell me you're done. I won't fire you. We'll pay you out. You'll continue to work over the next 30 days. But I just want to know so I can start to replace you. But if you do want to work, know that over the next 30, 60, 90 days, I'm going to get really involved in your life. Because it's either one of 2 things. It's a will thing or a skill thing. And if it's a will thing, then that's on you to figure that out and then put yourself and apply it. If it's a skill thing, I'm going to get involved. One person came back on Monday and said they didn't want to do it. The other 2 said they'd sign up for it. I got really involved in their lives. Both of them became very high performers in our organization. One of them is still a high performing individual contributor. The other one moved on and is now a director at NASDAQ. So it was getting involved in their lives in that way and watching them take on those positions. And in that team, it wasn't a slam when you got put on a performance plan anymore. It was just like, hey, I'm missing something. I need help. And anybody that's in management knows there's 2 types of performance plans. One is the one where we're going to actually help you. And the other one is basically the FU plan. And it's like, it looks like we're trying to help you, but we're not. And we're just doing it, checking our boxes and, getting you out.
We're making sure we don't get sued when we lay you off or fire you. That's what we're doing.
Exactly. But there's 2 of them. And I became the manager that cared about that. And I started spending a lot of extra time with my team, trying to understand, survey, get the pulse. What do you need to learn? What are we going to do? How are we going to figure out how to help you sell better? And that became the thesis for what became eventually Sales Platoon.
So, Dad, you actually kind of stole my question a little bit ago about incentives, but actually I got a second level to that, which is, Raleigh, what do you think about commission as an incentive for sales? Because obviously, like you said, we're all going to be financially motivated to some extent. We got to keep the roof over our head. But then there's also, so much more that you get out of purpose and those type of, motivations. So kind of looking back from, in retrospect, and then also from the managerial standpoint, how do you feel about kind of commission from a broad standpoint as an incentive?
Yeah, I think commission's great. I think it appeals to capitalism, at its purest time, but it appeals to man's deeper nature, which is, self-actualization. Look, I'm not here to dissuade anybody or disagree with anybody who thinks that a high base salary is the purpose for jobs. There are people in this world who are dollars for hours people. They want to know how many hours they're going to work per week, how many weeks of vacation they get, and they want to have some solidity. The challenge is that's not the way the civilian world works. The civilian world works like this. Companies exist to produce a profit. That's it. Mm-hmm. They produce a profit back to the owner or to the shareholder. The closer you are to revenue generation, the more actual job security you have. The further away you are, the less job security you have. It's just like in the military. Everything in the military is designed to support the person on the ground, boots on the ground, occupying territory. In the Marine Corps, we had 8 support personnel for every 1 forward deployed military member. You had to have that. But when you have a choice between feeding the person on the front line that's stopping the bad guy that's coming across the Lion's Gate and feeding the guy in the back that's guarding the gear, you're going to feed the guy on the front line because you need them sharp. It's the same thing in sales. The further you move away from revenue, the less job security you actually have. The reason people don't like it is because you get visibility. See, with opportunity comes accountability. With accountability comes visibility. Visibility is something people don't always want, because visibility means I'm going to be held accountable. A 5th grader with a calculator can tell if you're hitting quota, but it takes somebody who's been doing it for a decade to look at it to see, why are you hitting it or why are you not hitting it? Otis may have been the world's best sales professional, but he inherited a terrible territory and he's at 70%. But if you look at his territory and you're a good manager, you go, that territory should be at 50%. The fact that Otis is kicking butt for us, we need to make sure that we're going to adjust his total quota next year. We might have Raleigh, and Raleigh's at 150% quota. And I've had this. I've been very unpopular in companies, trust me, because I've had people at 150% quota, but they're just milking the proverbial cow. That quota should have been at 400% quota. So I take it away from them and give them to Otis next year. I've lost jobs because of that, because they're like, you're being disruptive. I'm like, I'm being fair. That guy's not performing. I'm not going to give him, he's killing our company. I'm going to give it to Otis. But that's where, is it there? Commission can be great. Variable compensation can be a great motivator. Look, and there's people that believe you shouldn't have commission. They think everybody should share in it. I think if you don't have, what is the motivation for me to work these extra hours, these mornings, these nights, these weekends? If I'm not compensated in some way for it, because I can't, there is no vacation on sales. I created a calculator that I use and share with our team that I'll share with anybody that wants it, called a vacation calculator. And essentially, when you're in sales, you need to think about like this. And if I'm doing, let's say my quota is $50,000 a month and I got to close 10 deals to get there. And to close those 10 deals, I got to have 40 deals in the pipeline. And to get 40 deals in the pipeline, I got to call in 160 first appointments. And over 22 days, that means that I need to have X number of appointments per day on my book. That means I had to make X number of calls in the months prior. So what happens when I take a week of vacation? The number of calls that I'm making to set up those meetings that wouldn't ordinarily happen don't happen. So I need to figure out how many calls I need to cost average out on the days I come back, because it's an effort equals reward kind of thing. You don't think about that if you're processing invoices. You go on break, who cares? You take a week off, the invoices will be there when you get back or when your team members takes care of it. If you get fired or you quit a sales job, who do you think inherits that quota? Doesn't go away. The manager does. And the manager's got to figure a way to do that, because it's not like Otis is going to naturally step up. Well, what about the pipeline they created? It's mostly personal, so it's going to evaporate. So again, sales is a really, really difficult role, but it's also one of the most rewarding roles once you understand it. But it's not as simple as I'm going to put in these hours and I'm going to get this result. That's not the way sales works. It can be the easiest job in the world when you're above quota too. No other job in the world can you take off a Friday afternoon if you're over quota and decide you're going to go golf, and try doing that as a coder.
Yeah.
I think what's super interesting is, as you're going through that, I was kind of thinking about, from the kind of theory level of it, of, giving them the, pure commission on one end of the spectrum versus, the safety net of consistent pay on the other end of the spectrum. And what I realized as you were talking was that on the two extremes of that spectrum, as far as, payment, the solution for both of them to get a good team and get good performance out of your team is proper management and vision and purpose and all of that. Because if inside of a commission, if you're only tied to that and you don't have you don't have the connection with the rest of the team and it's only financially motivated, then you're going to, set up a not great culture inside of it. Where then on the other end of the spectrum, if you're just on the safety net and you have no incentive to do anything, then why would you go make your sales calls if you're going to get paid anyway? And I think it's interesting that, management is basically the solution on either end of that spectrum, that it's, the painting the purpose of why you go do the work to give them another incentive. Or the much simpler solution is you give them the commission that they need to go move forward and make those sales. So I just thought that was an interesting observation.
Yeah, well, it's not an either or and a both and. It's it's a both and. And civilian look, there are commission only jobs. There's commission only sales jobs. Most business sales jobs are not commission only. They do come with a base salary. So, for example, when you first start out in sales and you take a position even as a business development rep, you're probably looking at a 50 to 60K base salary. You're going to make 80 to 90K your first year. Not bad money. But let's give you an example. If you go to LinkedIn and you got 5+ years sales experience in enterprise sales, they're going to pay you up to $300,000 a year, half of which is a base salary of $150,000 a year, plus another up to $150,000 a year for renewing your book of business. That's more than most CEOs make. So, other than the C-level and an executive, like I go to this sales conference last year. I'm going to go to it every year that I can, called Sales Summit. And so Scott Ingram created this thing, and his speakers have to be the number 1 or number 2 rep in the country in their division. So we're not talking about people who are just, regular average reps. These are guys who, some of them stepped away from VP or CEO roles to go be a sales rep. They had a guy from Salesforce.com who did a beautiful speech last year, W-2'd $1.2 million. W-2, $1.2 million. And you would expect guys like this and girls like this to be up, and there she would give a speech and it would be about, chest bumping and I'm the best, and, Jordan Belfort and, Grant Cardone. Yeah. The most selfless servant leaders you will ever meet in your life. You hear stories of, money didn't solve it. I had these personal problems. Here's what I still had to tackle. Or, they talk about giving back, or they talk about their customer. Everybody there is there to give. And the ones that aren't are tolerated by the ones that are there to give, because they know if they stick it out, they eventually will be. And you could pick them out like you could pick out a fart in the wind. It's like the guys that were there that were just like all about them. Well, I'm this and here's what I'm doing. And it's like you just tolerate that person because they're on that continuum of learning. Mm-hmm. That there's the wheel of life, man. And sometimes we're at the top of it and everything's going well and the money's coming in and every day's sunshine. And then some days you're at the very bottom of that wheel. And you're at the bottom of the wheel and the money's dried up and you're not hitting quota and nobody believes in you, and that's going to happen. And so I say sales is an interesting thing, where it really is self-actualization. It really is about understanding that you're on a wheel that is continuous. And that if you have the drive, determination, resiliency in your own life, again, if you go to a company and you don't like it, you can't do this in the military, but you do it in the civilian world. You don't like it, you don't like the pay, you don't like how they're treating you, go find another company.
Yeah. What I want to know, Raleigh, is, because I've heard this and you read it in books and various things like that too, is how do great salesmen become great leaders?
Well, they don't. They don't.
Okay.
They don't. So, you really have, there's 2 different types of people, and it's hard to learn this. And look, there's great salespeople. I'm a good salesperson. Some would say I'm a great salesperson. I say I'm a good salesperson. I think I'm a better manager. The skills don't transfer, and we learned this in the military. You have guys that are great individual performers, individual contributors, and they should probably stay in the scout sniper platoon, but then you make them platoon sergeant, they fall apart because it goes from being about me and mine to being about us and ours. Mm-hmm. And not everybody can make that switch. Now, we take military guys in the Marines, we take you through corporal's course, take you through sergeant's course, you go to staff NCOs, you go through officer school, you go through TBS, there's all kinds of leadership school. That stuff, guys, does not exist in the civilian world. There is no line of demarcation. One day I was sitting there talking shop and hanging out with the guys on my sales team. The next day I'm their manager. There's no different uniform, different rank, blood stripe on your pants. It's like, no, you're expected now to perform. No training.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't always make great leaders. What you got to find out is, are you going to be a leader of self, or are you going to be a leader of others? And a leader of others means I got to put their welfare ahead of my own. Now, I'm not saying, look, I'm not saying even Jordan Belfort, Wolf, all that, I'm not saying you can't be successful that way. I'm saying I don't know how to do it. My way to self is to service, to pathway to success has always been service. Give more than you get. Go from being a taker to being a giver. Try to help other people be more successful than you are, and it comes back and it pays dividends. Now, I'm not saying that's how you have to be. I know leaders who are successful and they're very totalitarian, but not every great salesman is a great sales leader. And sometimes you figure that out as you go on. One of my favorite stories was from the summit that I was last year. And the guy worked his way up to SVP of sales, and he realized he's not an SVP of sales. He's a sales guy. And so you don't get that option in the military. You don't get the option to go, you know what, I'm Master Gunnery Sergeant, but I was better being on the gun line. You don't get to keep that Master Gunnery Sergeant pay and then go back to doing the work of an E3. Mm-hmm. You can do that in the civilian world. It is not leadership in the civilian world. Promotion in the civilian world is not always rank.
Yeah, that's
I think
great insight.
I was just going to add that I think it's interesting. It's utility really for the individual. It's if you're talk about the Jordan Belfort example. If your utility is you're getting it all from money, and you get less utility from teaching and these kind of things, like you were saying, Raleigh, of the light bulb moment. I think all three of us can talk. Like that's one of the most amazing things out there. We all coach, we all are managers. That we get a lot of utility from that light bulb moment. And I would rather have 5 light bulb moments in my week than make $1,000 extra this month. Those moments have more value to me. And I think it's an important thing to just kind of look at it from that standpoint of, it's like, what value do I get out of this? Do I like working with people? Would I rather make more money? Would I rather help teach? Like, where does your value actually come? Because like you said earlier, it's not all about the money, but you need the money to go do things. And so it's about recognizing, being honest with yourself of like, what am I really getting out of this in these different positions? So you don't get stuck at a spot that you don't enjoy.
Uh-huh. Yeah. You summed it up well.
Yeah, that didn't happen often. So,
yeah.
So when did you feel the desire? I mean, you talked a little bit about legacy, but what I want to know is when did let me give back to the vet tribe. When did that, what happened there? Did you have a moment? Was it a light bulb moment or what?
It was a moment. It was a moment of insanity maybe, but it was a moment of something. And, I'd conceptualized this idea of a sales academy. I felt like that traditional education failed most individuals who wanted to go into selling. I guest taught Northern Illinois University, a couple places, and met with their sales leaders. And I just found fundamentally that they were too far removed from the day-to-day to be useful. And so, but I also wanted to have more scope and scale than I did in just a small sales team. And so I'd gone out and tried to create this sales boot camp and wasn't having a lot of success. And I was on a run by Navy Pier one day, and I decided, I said, God, look, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing with this or not, but, I'm not seeing a lot of market movement on this. What should I do with what I've created? Should I go to an organization and just, go there and bring what I did and just continue to teach? And I kept running. I usually like to run till I can't run anymore. And then I turn around and I head back. That's my usual training plan. I don't have a distance. I run till I feel like I can't go any further. And then I turn around and I make my way slowly back.
And if I did that, I wouldn't make it to the end of the sidewalk.
Well, there you go. Sometimes that's far enough. But, and the thought came out and it said, what about in the military? Because I was thinking about what's the world's largest graduating body of people. So I started doing some research when I got back, and I found out that 280,000 people a year leave active duty. I found out that 53% of them are under the age of 26, and that 93% of them leave without college degrees. 75% of them leave active service without any threat or hope of a job. So you think about that, that's a crisis of about 100 and some thousand people a year that are coming off active duty that eventually become the other half of what I consider to be the do-gooders and the wisher-wellers. Mm-hmm. And so when you first come out, there's all kinds of do-gooders and wisher-wellers that want to help you, and it's almost overwhelming. But then until you get to a crisis point, you're a drug-addicted homeless veteran, there's no one else to help you. And I thought that we deserve something a little more than that. So I started to go out and said, what if I conceptualize something that focused on those military veterans, because they're going to understand my story and I can help transform them. Now, I'm not saying these guys can't go out and do even better just getting a job. Maybe they would. But there's going to be a percentage of those guys that said, I want to do what you did, and I'm willing to do what you did, which is take a little bit of a step, maybe pay backwards, especially if you're coming out as an O5 or an E8 or E9 for an opportunity 2 to 3 years down the road to double and triple your salary. Take the same bet I did, because not a sucker's bet. And can I prepare them? And so I met a gentleman who said I couldn't possibly do everything that I ended up doing. He said, you got to go get DoD skill bridge approved, but you're not going to be able to do it on your own. You're gonna need to go and develop relationships with, hiring a heroes and these people to get candidates, but they're not going to even entertain talking to you. I told him about an apprenticeship. Well, you're not going to be able to get an apprenticeship approved for this because they don't approve apprenticeships for, and all you got to do is tell me I can't do something and I'm going to do it. Now, the one thing he was right on was I was undercapitalized. And so if you're listening to this and you got needs for hiring salespeople and you want to help us get capitalized better, reach out, because he was right about that. I'm undercapitalized. But I did all that. And we're going to graduate our 100th person this year, Otis. And I'm talking about people who come back. Now, not everybody is a success. I'm sure there's a few people that are going to be like, that guy, 98% of them come out and go, my God, you taught me so much about what I learned. I'll give you a great example. There's been a guy come through. He's a tanker. Didn't know much about computers. Didn't know much about the business world. He's an E8, I believe. But he came through, combat oriented most of his time, and he was not doing great, but we liked him. And he was lagging behind the team in the first 6 weeks. And, at some point, I think he hit his own wall, just like I had mine. He had his own, and he and I talked. He decided to stick it out. And somewhere around week 7 or 8, he started to get it. Started to get HubSpot, started to understand sales, started to understand how things were going. He developed his own sequences, developed his own pathway out. And by the time we graduated, he was our honor graduate with points, and he was our Top Gun graduate as well. And so, this gentleman had gone and raised himself from a point of obscurity to being in the top spot in our graduating class. He went on to a large company that I won't name because I'm going to say something negative. But he went to a large company, and he was doing really well. And last I heard, he was 254% quota. So that's pretty good. So I called him up and I said, hey, how's this individual doing? They said, well, we're not happy. He left. And I said, all right, well, what happened? He said, well, he was at 10 months and he decided to take another job and he resigned. And you said that these guys would stay for a year. And I said, well, I assumed they would. I said, tell me, how was he doing when he left? Was he below quota? Oh, no, he was above quota. Okay, so he's above quota. He was doing well. So what was his complaint? He wasn't getting promoted. He wanted to go to another job where he could actually sell instead of doing BDR work. All right. So you had a guy who was 250% quota. He had ramped quickly, and why wouldn't you move him? Well, we like him to be in there at least a year and really 18 months in that role before we promote him. And I didn't miss a beat. And I said, so you want me to give you a dumber, slower candidate? They said, well, no, we just want guaranteed they're going to stay here a year. I said, again, I don't feel at fault for that. I said, you got to fix your processes if you want to get any more of our candidates, because if you're holding them back, they should leave.
Yeah.
And he's doing just fine at his new company.
That's awesome.
And so to me, that's a great success story, and so I love it. We don't have time, but I can tell you about things, and I had my experiences of my own, that hit me like that. So I was proud of them.
Well, I had one quick one, it should be fastball right down the middle for you. So nice, easy one to end on. So a lot of people think
every time they say that, it's going to be like,
that's okay. A little slow ball down the middle.
What's the meaning?
So a lot of people, I think that sales is a dirty word, and I just kind of want to throw it over to you of just why is sales not a dirty word? What kind of perspective switch do people need to make on that?
Yeah, sales is a dirty word. I don't know. Maybe it is. It's your conception of it as your experience with it, is your perspective from it. So, I hope that this podcast has helped reframe in some way what it means to be a salesman. Look, a salesperson is nothing more than a friend you hadn't met yet that's trying to help you uncover things in your business that may not be working as well as they could, and to introduce you to services and tools that'll help you function better. I don't know a friend that's better in the world. It's like you're outside cutting your grass with scissors and they want to introduce you to a lawnmower. That's a good neighbor. Now, I'm not saying every salesperson you meet doesn't think that way. I'm not saying that every person or customer you talk to is going to want to hear your solution. I'm not saying it's the right role for everybody, but if you like solving complex problems if you like helping and fixing things and you like them working better than before you got there, if you like a career where you're going to get paid what you're worth, not the rank they pin on you, sales might be for you, you know? But if you're thinking of sales as just, it's a sucker's game and they've got money and you got to go get it from them, you're probably better off not to take our course.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I tell you, just on adding on to that, pardon me. I read a book, somebody I was doing some stuff with years ago, after the Army, told me to read Mark McCullough's book on selling. And that was, for me, that was the eye opener that, damn, I was in sales even as a Green Beret, you know,
yep.
whether it was selling my team to go do a mission, selling what we were doing on the mission to the locals, or all those things. I'd been a sales guy my entire military career and didn't even realize it. And that was, you know, that was, to me, that was such a foundational eye opener that, damn, wish I would have read that when I was 25, sort of thing. Because it does change your whole philosophy. So, yeah.
I'm thinking here of just like how much of our bad image around salespeople that a lot of people have just comes from the used car salesman you see on TV and in some comedy show, you know, some jackass type of thing. It's like, I feel like that's where a lot of it comes from, because almost every time we have somebody who's in sales on the show, you know, completely change your perspective on it every single time.
Well, selling, and Otis hit it, you know, selling is just persuasion.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, it's really about reframing ideas that someone has to help them make a better decision based upon the information presented. I mean, you might be selling your friends on which movie you're going to go to, what sport you're going to play, or what you're going to do when you're on vacation at the beach. But you have the difference there is that you have a set of desires and goals, and they have a set of desires or goals. And the sales process is essentially working together to come to terms on what's the best for the unit that you're discussing. So sometimes part of selling is getting to know. No is a completely logical answer. Hey, thanks for the process. We went through it, but your service or solution is not a fit for our organization. Great. That's a good outcome.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, man. All right. So what did I learn besides invoking the chesty puller card? You know, that's always a good one. I go back to, I thought this was really an interesting way you put it, was sales equals self-actualization, you know, in that sort of sense of, if I'm doing this, I have to have that confidence and going forward and belief in I can help you. and really, what do we, I mean, if as humans, we should be helping other humans. That's part of life. So if you look at sales in that way, I think that's a great way of putting it, is that self-actualization. So Camden, how about you? What'd you learn?
Raleigh, was something you said, don't want to bother you. You know, and bothering somebody is offering to help somebody that doesn't want the help. And I thought that was a really interesting way of thinking about it. Just, you know, you just want to help somebody, they don't want the help. Hey, don't bother them. You know, good perspective switch on that.
Yeah. Well, good. Well, I hope this was useful for you guys and some of the listeners. And
Wait, you ain't done yet. You ain't done yet. What did you learn?
What did I learn? Well, I learned that you guys host a good talk show. You know, you had some good, insightful questions, but no, I think it's, you know, just re-entering anytime that you get a chance to talk about, you know, your own pathway, you can't help but look back and see the unseen hand. And, you know, one of the things that I was reminded of was, you know, we all have a purpose, you know, in this planet. We all have a tribe that we're part of, you know, and if you haven't found yours yet, you know, maybe you're creating it right now, you know, and it's, you know, I tell you what, they say that, you know, and I don't make me religious or not, but they said that, you know, life laughs when we make plans. And it's like, you know, the universe will find a way to find a utility for you somewhere. Keep doing the next right thing. Keep your head about you, you know, and remember that, you know, the things that you do matter. You know, there's one of my favorite, you know, just reminded of this, and I think this podcast helped me remember it. A friend of mine, Mark's talking about, he likes reading things. He's a wealthy guy, but he likes reading. And there was a guy that has the best cleaned restroom in New York City. It was like the cleanest bathroom in New York City was the title of this article. And so he actually flew out to meet this guy. This guy's like, People keep showing up wanting to meet me. All I do is, he says, no, man, you're extraordinary. Like, you're in New York City, you got the cleanest bathroom here. It's like in a metro terminal. And it's like his job. He says, what's my job? I just do my job. And, some days, it really is that simple. It's like, before you think about leaving to go do something else, maybe I would ask myself, am I doing what the job in front of me is today first?
Mm. That's awesome. That's awesome. Raleigh, how do people get in touch with you and learn more about Sales Platoon?
Yeah, pretty easy. We got a website like most people these days. You can go to salesplatoon.com, as it sounds, salesplatoon.com. They can reach out to me. It's my name, Raleigh, at salesplatoon.com, or mysalesplatoon.com is the best one. But our website's the best way to find out more information. If you're a transitioning veteran, or if you're a company that wants to hire a transitioning veteran graduates, just reach out.
Awesome, man. Well, hey, man, really appreciate your time and insights today. This has been great.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you guys as well. So I got to jump back in. I got a live cohort right now. It's waiting on me for some insight. So,
yep. Camden, run us out.
All right. Thank you all for listening to the Cam and Otis Show, and a special thanks to our guest, Raleigh Wilkins, for joining us today. And of course, our sponsor, Tribe and Purpose. Find your tribe, find your purpose. Get started for free today at findyourpurpose.coach. Make sure to follow the Cam and Otis Show on Instagram and Facebook, and please rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening. Videos of the podcast are available on our YouTube page, and you can always get a full archive of the episodes at thecamandotisshow.buzzsprout.com. Thanks again, and we'll see y'all next time.